Welcome to the Royal Griot, the home of stories that touch the soul and celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. We are so incredibly grateful for the love and support you've shown this channel. It is because of you that we keep telling these stories. Please take a moment to drop a comment below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing our global family grow. Now let us begin. Look at her. Just look at her. My wife Vanessa's laughter cut through the expensive silk and perfume of our Banana Island mansion like a jagged blade. She was standing in the center of our grand ballroom, surrounded by the elite of Lagos, oil magnates, politicians and socialites, all clutching crystal flutes of champagne. In her hand she held a silver bell, ringing it as if she were summoning a servant from a bygone era. I stood by the mahogany bar, my heart sinking into my stomach. I am Emeka Adeyemi, a man whose name controls boardrooms across the continent, but in my own home, I felt like a stranger to the woman I had married. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vanessa announced, her voice dripping with a cruelty she didn't even try to hide. "You all know I have a heart for the less fortunate. So, for tonight's 5-year anniversary gala, I decided to provide a little live entertainment. A reminder of where we all came from, and why some people stay exactly where they belong." The massive gold leaf doors at the end of the hall creaked open. 2 security guards led a woman inside. She was dressed in a faded, threadbare yellow iro and buba that had seen better decades. Her head tie was frayed, and she carried a plastic bucket filled with dirty rags and a wooden mop. The room went silent. Then a few of Vanessa's friends began to titter. "I told her she could earn a month's wages in one night," Vanessa whispered loudly to the Duchess of Ikoyi, who stood nearby. "All she has to do is scrub the floors while we dance. A little joke to keep us humble, don't you think?" I stepped forward, my face hot with a mixture of shame and fury. "Vanessa, this is too much. This is a human being." "Oh, hush, Emeka," she snapped, not even looking at me. "She's lucky to be breathing the same air as this AC. Look at her, she's practically a statue." The woman in the faded yellow cloth hadn't moved. She stood with her head bowed, her hands gripped tightly around the handle of the mop. Her knuckles were white. She looked small, broken, and utterly out of place beneath the 3 million naira chandeliers. "Well?" Vanessa shouted, clicking her manicured heels on the marble floor. "Don't just stand there, woman. There's a spill near the buffet. Start there. Let everyone see how well you work." The woman slowly began to walk. The sound of her worn-out slippers, flip-flop, echoed against the silence of the stunned crowd. The mockery in the room was palpable. I saw people taking out their phones, recording the scene, likely for their Instagram stories. My wife, the billionaire's wife, was bullying a cleaning lady for sport. As the woman reached the center of the room, right under the brightest light, she tripped. It wasn't a graceful fall. She landed hard on her knees, the plastic bucket tipping over, spilling gray, soapy water across the white Italian marble. Vanessa let out a shriek of delighted laughter. "Clumsy too. Emeka, look at the help I found." I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed past a group of laughing businessmen and rushed toward the woman. I didn't care about my bespoke suit or what the papers would say tomorrow. I reached down to help her up. "I am so sorry," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Please let me help you." I took her hand. It was rough, calloused from years of hard labor, but it felt strangely familiar. As I pulled her up, her head tie slipped off, revealing a crown of salt and pepper hair. Then she finally looked up. Her eyes met mine. They weren't the eyes of a stranger. They were the eyes that had watched over me when I had nothing. They were the eyes that had cried when I left our village 25 years ago with only a plastic bag and a dream. The glass of whiskey in my other hand shattered as it hit the floor. "Mama?" I breathed, the word barely a whisper. The entire room gasped. The laughter died instantly. Vanessa's face went from a triumphant mask of cruelty to a ghostly, sickly pale. The cleaning lady, my wife had invited to mock, the woman she had forced to crawl on her knees for the amusement of the Lagos elite, was Mrs. Abigail Adeyemi, my mother. The woman I had been told was dead for the last 15 years. I looked at my mother, then at my wife, then back at the woman who had birthed me, who was now shivering in a puddle of dirty water in the middle of my own empire. The betrayal was so sharp I could taste blood in my mouth. "Emeka," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know it was your house. They just told me a rich lady needed help." I turned to Vanessa, my eyes burning with a fire that made the guests at the front row shrink back. My wife was trembling, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You did this?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "Emeka, I didn't know. I just asked the agency for the most desperate-looking woman they had. I wanted to make a point about success. I looked at the woman who had shared my bed, realizing I had been sleeping next to a monster. But the shock was only beginning. Because as my mother stood there, she didn't look at me with anger. She looked at the door. "He's coming, Emeka," she whispered. "The man who paid for me to come here. He said it was time you knew the truth about the fortune you built." Just then, the front doors of the mansion didn't just open. They were flung wide by two men in black suits who didn't belong to my security team. A man stepped into the light. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a suit that cost more than my first 3 cars combined. He held a legal folder in his hand, and his face was a mirror of my own, 30 years older. My breath hitched. This was the man who had supposedly died in a car accident when I was a boy. The man whose unpaid debts I had spent my entire life trying to outrun. "The party is over, Vanessa," the stranger said, his voice booming through the hall. "And the ownership of this house just changed hands." I stood there, holding my mother's trembling hand, caught between the wife who had betrayed my blood and the father who had returned from the grave to take back his empire. "Get out of my house. Get out right now before I have the police drag you to Kirikiri." Vanessa's voice rose to a shrill, hysterical pitch that cracked the heavy silence of the ballroom. She was pointing a shaking, manicured finger at the silver-haired man, her face contorted in a mask of terror and rage. "Emeka, call security. Why are they just standing there? This man is an imposter. A fraud." I didn't move. I couldn't move. My hands were still wrapped around my mother's thin, trembling shoulders. The scent of her, the faint smell of sunlight and the cheap detergent she'd been using to scrub floors, clashed violently with the expensive French perfumes of the women backing away from us. "He is no fraud, Vanessa," my mother whispered, her voice stronger now that she was standing. She looked at the man by the door, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flash of a much younger woman in her eyes, a woman who had once loved with everything she had. "Segun? Is it really you?" The man stepped forward, the clicking of his Italian leather shoes the only sound in the room. He ignored the gasps of the socialites and the cameras still recording from the sidelines. He stopped 5 feet from me, his eyes searching my face. I saw the same jawline, the same high forehead I saw in the mirror every morning. "Emeka," he said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated in my chest. "You've grown into a powerful man. A billionaire. But you've built your empire on a foundation of lies told by the people you trusted most. You died," I choked out, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "I went to the funeral. I saw the casket lowered into the ground in our village. I spent 15 years paying off the debts they said you left behind. I worked myself to the bone so Mama and I wouldn't starve, and then I was told she died of a broken heart while I was away in the north." "Lies," the man said, tossing the legal folder onto a nearby table. It slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of Vanessa. "Your wife didn't just find your mother through a cleaning agency by accident tonight, Emeka. She's been paying a monthly stipend to a handler in the slums of Abigail to keep your mother hidden, making sure she never crossed your path. And as for me, I didn't die. I was framed, nearly killed, and forced to flee the country by the very people who helped you rise to the top." I turned my gaze to Vanessa. She was backing away, her eyes darting toward the grand staircase. "He's lying. Emeka, don't listen to him. He's a ghost, a madman. I've done everything for you. I built your image. I made you the king of Lagos. By mocking my mother?" I roared, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. The sheer volume of my anger made the crystal chandeliers tremble. "By bringing her here to be laughed at by these vultures?" I looked at the friends, who had been laughing minutes ago. They were now whispering, their faces tight with scandal. This wasn't just a social faux pas, this was the fall of a dynasty in real time. "The agency," I said, walking toward Vanessa. Every step I took felt like a hammer blow. "You told me you were hiring a cleaning crew for the gala. You told me you wanted to give back to the community. You searched for the most pathetic person you could find. Did you know? Did you know it was her the moment you saw her photo?" Vanessa's back hit the mahogany bar. She trapped. I thought she was gone, Emeka. I thought if you saw her like this, old, broken, smelling of the gutter, you would finally realize that your past is a burden. I did it for us. To protect our status. How can you be the king of industry with a mother who sells roasted corn on the roadside?" A collective gasp went up from the crowd. My mother flinched as if she had been struck. "My mother is a queen," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly, calm whisper. "And you are nothing but a tenant in a house that no longer belongs to you. The silver-haired man, the man who claimed to be my father, Segun, stepped up to the bar. He opened the folder. This house, the Adeyemi holdings, the private jets, the offshore accounts, you think they were yours because of your hard work alone, Emeka? No. They were held in a blind trust one established before I was forced out. A trust that could only be unlocked by the presence of both the heir and the true matriarch. He looked at Vanessa with a coldness that made the air feel thin. And the trust has a morality clause. Any spouse found to be bringing public or private shame upon the family lineage through cruelty or deceit is automatically stripped of all marital assets. You wanted to mock a cleaning lady tonight, Vanessa. But in doing so, you triggered the very clause that makes you a beggar. Vanessa let out a hollow, mocking laugh, though her hands were shaking so hard she had to grip the bar. You're bluffing. My lawyers vetted everything. I own 40% of the shares. You own 40% of a shell company, Segun replied, pulling out a document with a bright red seal. The real power remained with the man you thought was a ghost. And tonight, the ghost has returned to settle the score. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. My life, my marriage, my very identity was shifting beneath my feet. I looked at my mother. She was watching Segun with a mixture of hope and terror. Is it true, Mama? I asked. Did she keep you away? My mother nodded slowly, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She came to me years ago, Emeka. She said you were ashamed of me. She said your new life had no room for a village woman who couldn't speak proper English. She gave me a small room in a compound and told me if I ever tried to contact you, she would use your power to have my brothers in the village arrested. I only came tonight because I was told it was a job. I didn't know it was a trap to make me a laughingstock. The betrayal was a physical weight. I had spent years mourning a woman who was living only miles away, thinking I was the one who had failed her by not being there when she died. All the while, the woman I called my wife was using my own money to keep my mother in poverty and fear. I turned to the room, to the elite of Lagos who were hungrily consuming our tragedy. The party is over. I shouted. Leave. All of you. Out of my house. Actually, son, Segun said, his eyes fixed on the front door where a new group of men in dark uniforms was entering. It's not your house yet. And it's certainly not hers. One of the men in uniform stepped forward. He wasn't local police. He was from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. He held up a warrant. Mrs. Vanessa Adeyemi? The officer asked. Vanessa turned even paler if that was possible. What is this? Emeka, tell them who I am. We know exactly who you are, the officer said. We have records of the offshore transfers you've been making from your husband's accounts to a private firm in the Cayman Islands. Money intended to pay off the handlers, who were keeping Chief Segun and Mrs. Abigail suppressed. You're being charged with embezzlement, conspiracy, and kidnapping by proxy. The room erupted into chaos. Vanessa tried to run, tried to scramble up the stairs, but the officers were faster. They caught her at the first landing, the gold bangles on her wrists replaced by cold, steel handcuffs. Emeka. Emeka, help me, she screamed, her voice echoing through the ballroom. I did it for you. I did it for us. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my mother on one side and the father I thought was dead on the other. I didn't say a word as they dragged her down. As she passed me, I saw the true face of the woman I had loved, a face filled with a desperate, ugly greed. You'll lose everything too, she hissed at me, her eyes wild. If I go down, this whole empire falls. Your father is a criminal. That's why he ran. I didn't run because I was a criminal, Vanessa, Segun said, his voice calm as she was led toward the door. I ran because I was the only one who knew where the bodies were buried. And now, I'm the one with the shovel. As the police cars sped away, their sirens wailing into the Lagos night, the mansion fell into a deafening silence. The guests had fled, leaving behind half-eaten hors d'oeuvres and spilled champagne. I looked at my father. Why now? Why after all these years? Segun looked at my mother, then back at me. Because the person who set me up, the person who told you I was dead and paid Vanessa to keep your mother hidden, he's not finished yet. He's coming for the rest of the fortune. And he's someone you call a brother. My heart stopped. I only had one brother in the business world, my business partner and best friend, Tund. Before I could ask another question, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an emergency alert from my company's security headquarters. Sir, there has been a breach at the main vault. The digital assets are being liquidated. Authorization code, TUND001. I looked at my father in horror. The night was supposed to be a celebration of 5 years of marriage. Instead, in the span of 1 hour, I had found my mother, discovered my father was alive, watched my wife be arrested, and was now watching my entire billion-dollar empire vanish into thin air. "We have to go," Segun said, his face grim. "He thinks he's won because he has the codes. But he forgot one thing." "What?" I asked, clutching my mother's hand. "He forgot that the true wealth of the Adeyemi family isn't in the bank. It's in the blood." Just then, a loud explosion rocked the grounds of the mansion. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness. In the distance, the sound of a helicopter approaching grew louder and louder. Chapter 3. The darkness was absolute, a heavy velvet shroud that smelled of ozone and burnt wiring. For a moment, the only sound was the ringing in my ears and the frantic, shallow breathing of my mother. I reached out instinctively, my hands finding her thin arms. She was shaking, a leaf caught in a harmattan storm. "Mama, I'm here." "I'm right here," I whispered, pulling her into my chest. The silk of my tuxedo felt like a mockery against her rough cotton clothes. My mind was a chaotic storm of images. Vanessa in handcuffs, the father I had buried 15 years ago standing in my ballroom, and now, the sound of my life's work being drained away by the man I called my brother. "Emeka, we must move." My father's voice came through the gloom, steady and commanding. I heard the sound of a heavy metal latch being thrown. The back service entrance. "Now." "Who blew up the transformer, Papa?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Was it Tund?" "Tund is a puppet, Emeka. He has the ambition of a lion but the heart of a hyena. He wouldn't risk an explosion. No, there are bigger players at work tonight. Players who have waited 15 years for me to show my face." We moved through the servants' quarters, a part of the mansion I rarely visited. It was ironic. Vanessa had spent millions decorating the public rooms to intimidate our guests, but the back halls were narrow and functional. We emerged into the humid Lagos night, the air thick with the scent of diesel and the distant rhythmic thumping of that helicopter. A black limousine sat idling at the edge of the property, its lights extinguished. A man I didn't recognize stood by the door, a mysterious stranger with a face scarred by years of hard living. He nodded to my father and opened the door. "Get in," Segun commanded. As the car pulled away, leaving the darkened silhouette of my Banana Island empire behind, I looked at my mother in the dim light of the cabin. She was staring out the window, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and sorrow. "I thought you were in heaven, Mama," I said, the words finally breaking free. "I went to the compound in the village. They told me you had passed. They showed me a grave." She turned to me, a tear carving a path through the dust on her cheek. "Vanessa paid them, Emeka. She paid the elders to lie. She told them you were a big man now, a billionaire who didn't want the shame of a mother who couldn't read. She told me you had authorized it. She showed me papers with your signature saying I was to stay in the city in that room and never speak your name again. I never signed anything." I roared, slamming my fist into the leather upholstery. "It was a forgery. Every bit of it." "I know that now, my son," she said, reaching out to stroke my face with a hand that had spent the last decade scrubbing floors for people who weren't fit to lace my shoes. "But back then, I was just a village woman. I didn't know the power of a cold-hearted woman with a pen. I believed I was protecting your fortune. I believed my silence was the price of your success. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing the breath from my lungs. While I was flying in a private jet to London and Dubai, while I was sitting in the boardroom deciding the fate of thousands of employees, my mother was struggling to buy a loaf of bread, believing I hated her. "Forgive me, Mama," I choked out. "Please forgive me for being so blind." "There is nothing to forgive, Emeka," she whispered. "Destiny has a way of twisting, but it always leads us back to where we belong. Tonight is a miracle. I'm holding my son again. That is more than any empire." I looked at my father, who was staring intensely at a tablet screen, watching flickering lines of code. "And you, Papa? You let me believe you were a ghost. You let me struggle alone." Segun sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of years. "I had no choice, Emeka. The men who framed me for the bank collapse 15 years ago, they didn't just want my money. They wanted my life. If I had stayed, they would have killed you and your mother to ensure the Adeyemi name ended with me. I had to become a secret admirer of your progress from the shadows. I watched you build Adeyemi Holdings from nothing. I was the anonymous investor who provided the seed capital for your first major contract in Abuja. Did you think a 24-year-old boy got a 10 billion naira tender on merit alone?" I stared at him, stunned. I remembered that day, the day my life changed. A mysterious foreign firm had backed my bid when every bank in Lagos had slammed the door in my face. I had always called it luck. "You were my guardian angel?" I asked. "I was a father doing the only thing he could, Segun said. But Tun found out. He's been working with the same people who took me down. He convinced Vanessa that you were going to divorce her, that you found out about her secret accounts. He played on her greed and her fear to get the codes to the vault. Vanessa was always cold-hearted, I mused, thinking back to the early days of our marriage. I had been blinded by her beauty and her pedigree. I thought she was the perfect partner for a billionaire. I didn't see that her heart was made of stone. But to do this to Mama? To mock her in public? She wanted to break you, Emeka, my mother said softly. She knew that if she could make you laugh at me or make you turn your back on me in front of your friends, your soul would be hers forever. She wanted to kill the soft-hearted boy I raised and replace him with a monster like herself. The car slowed down as we entered a more modest neighborhood, far from the glitz of Banana Island. We pulled into a walled compound in Surulere. It was a simple house, clean and well-guarded, but a far cry from the mansion I had just lost. This is a safe house, Segun said. Tun thinks you're heading for the airport. He's already frozen your passports and alerted his contacts in immigration. For now, the billionaire Emeka Adeyemi has disappeared. To the world, you are a man who has lost everything. We stepped inside and for the first time in 15 years, we sat down as a family. My mother insisted on going to the kitchen. Despite my protest, she began to fry plantains and brew tea. Let her, Segun whispered. She has been a servant for 10 years. Tonight, she needs to be the mother of the house again. It is her healing. As the smell of frying plantains filled the air, a sense of peace I hadn't felt in decades settled over me. Yes, the boardroom was in chaos. Yes, my bank accounts were being drained. But for the first time I wasn't alone. What's the plan, Papa? I asked, leaning over the table. Tund is going to the board meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Segun said. He's going to announce that you've fled the country following Vanessa's arrest for financial crimes. He's going to move for an emergency takeover. He has the liquid assets, but he doesn't have the original deed of the trust. He pulled a small, ancient-looking key from his pocket. The vault at the headquarters has a physical backup. A ledger that predates all the digital codes. It contains the evidence of the original fraud from 15 years ago, and the proof that Tun's father was the one who pulled the trigger on my reputation. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Tun's father? Chief Al-Yamid. The same, Segun nodded. He used my death to build his own fortune. And now his son is trying to do the same to you. It is a cycle of betrayal that ends tomorrow. I looked toward the kitchen where my mother was humming a soft Yoruba hymn. The resilience in her voice brought tears to my eyes. She had been abandoned, betrayed and mocked, yet she was still singing. We go to the office tomorrow, I said, my voice hardening. But I don't go as the billionaire. I go as the son of Abigail and Segun Adeyemi. It won't be easy, Segun warned. They will have security. They will have the law on their side, or at least the law they've bought. I have something they don't, I said, looking at the key. I have the truth. And in Lagos, the truth is the only thing that can't be liquidated. That night, I slept on a simple foam mattress on the floor of the safe house. It was the best sleep I had had in years. I didn't dream of stock prices or litigation. I dreamt of a small boy in a village, holding his mother's hand as they walked to the market. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the window. My mother was sitting at the edge of the mattress, holding a bowl of warm ogi. Eat, my son, she said. Today you go to battle. But remember, the battle is not yours, it is the Lord's. You are a child of destiny. No weapon fashioned against you shall prosper. I ate the simple meal, feeling a strength returning to my bones that no gym or protein shake could ever provide. I looked at the time. 8:15 a.m. It's time, I said. We piled into a beat-up old Toyota, the kind of car a billionaire wouldn't be caught dead in. Segun drove, his eyes fixed on the road with a predator's focus. I sat in the back with Mama. I had dressed in a simple white kaftan, leaving the designer suits behind. As we approached the towering glass edifice of Adeyemi Holdings in Victoria Island, I saw the crowd of reporters gathered at the entrance. News of the billionaire's downfall had spread like wildfire. The headlines on the digital newsstands were brutal. The fall of the house of Adeyemi, Vanessa's shame, Emeka on the run. Look at them, I muttered. They're waiting for the carcass. Let them wait, Segun said, pulling into the underground parking garage through a side entrance Tun didn't know I still had the remote for. By noon they'll have a different story to tell. We reached the private elevator. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Segun pressed the button for the penthouse boardroom. As the elevator climbed, the tension in the small space became unbearable. I reached out and took my mother's hand. Her grip was like iron. The doors slid open. The boardroom was filled with men in dark suits, the directors of my company. At the head of the table sat Tund, looking smug in a suit I had bought him for his birthday. He was holding a gavel, ready to strike the final blow to my legacy. As the CEO is currently a fugitive from justice, Tund was saying, his voice oozing with false sympathy, it is our duty to the shareholders to. He stopped mid-sentence. His jaw dropped so far it almost hit the mahogany table. Every head in the room turned toward us. I stepped into the room, my mother on my right arm and my dead father on my left. The CEO is not a fugitive, Tund, I said, my voice ringing out with the authority of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. He's just been busy reintroducing himself to his family. Tund scrambled to his feet, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Emeka? What is this? Who are these people? You know exactly who they are, I said, walking toward him. And you know why we're here. Just then the doors behind us burst open again. Two men in suits I didn't recognize stepped in, followed by a woman in a sharp navy blazer. She looked like a high-level federal agent. Tund Alyamide? She asked, her voice cold and professional. Yes? Who are you? I'm with the Special Fraud Unit. We've just received an anonymous tip, and a very interesting digital ledger, regarding the liquidation of Adeyemi Holdings' assets into a private account in the name of Alyamide Global. Tund looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Then he looked at my father. You, he hissed at Segun. You were supposed to be under the ground. I was, Segun said, a grim smile playing on his lips. But I decided I didn't like the neighborhood. The agent moved toward Tund, but he suddenly lunged for a briefcase on the table. Stay back. I have authorization. I have the codes. The codes are useless, Tund, I said calmly. I changed the master key from the safe house an hour ago. You've been trying to drain an empty lake. Tund let out a scream of rage and tried to push past the agents, but they tackled him to the floor. As he was being pinned down, he looked up at me, spittle flying from his mouth. You think you've won? Vanessa has enough dirt on you to bury you for 100 years. She's talking to the EFCC right now. Let her talk, I said, looking down at the man who had been my best friend. She's only proving that we were both fools for trusting her. As Tund was let out in the same manner as Vanessa, the directors in the room began to mumble and stand up, looking at me with new eyes. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the window at the sprawling city of Lagos below. My fortune was in shambles. My reputation was bruised. My marriage was a lie. But as my mother stepped up beside me and put her hand on the glass, looking out at the world she had been hidden from for 15 years, I realized I had never been richer. It's a new beginning, Emeka, she whispered. Yes, Mama. A new beginning. But the relief was short-lived. My father's phone rang. He answered it, his face going pale. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sudden, sharp fear. What is it, Papa? The prison, he whispered. There's been a riot at the female wing where they were holding Vanessa. She's gone, Emeka. She escaped. I looked back at the window, the sense of peace vanishing instantly. Vanessa was out there. And a woman with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. The news ticker at the bottom of the television screen was a blurred line of red and white, but the words burned into my retina like hot coals. Breaking news: riot at Kirikiri female wing. Multiple inmates missing. Socialite Vanessa Adeyemi believed to be among the escapees. I sat on the edge of the worn sofa in the Surulere safe house, my head in my hands. The boardroom victory from only hours ago felt like a hollow dream. In Lagos, money can build a palace, but it can also buy a way out of a prison cell. Vanessa was a woman of deep pockets and even deeper grudges. She wasn't just running, she was hunting. She's not going to the border, Papa, I said, my voice barely a whisper above the hum of the old standing fan in the corner. She's not the type to hide in a village or flee to Cotonou. She's coming for us. She's coming to finish what she started. My father, Segun, was standing by the window, peering through the slats of the wooden blinds. He had discarded his expensive suit jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were still muscular despite his age. He looked like a man who had spent 15 years looking over his shoulder, because he had. She is a wounded lioness, Emeka, Segun replied without turning around. And a lioness who has lost her pride is the most dangerous thing in the bush. But she is not acting alone. To orchestrate a riot and an escape in under 4 hours? That takes more than just Vanessa's connections. That takes the kind of dark power that forced me into the shadows all those years ago. From the kitchen, I heard the rhythmic clack-clack of a knife against a wooden board. My mother, Abigail, was preparing peppers for a stew. It was her way of coping. For 10 years, she had survived by keeping her head down and focusing on the work in front of her. Even now, with a billionaire son and a resurrected husband, she retreated to the comfort of the labor she knew. I stood up and walked into the small kitchen. I took the knife from her hand gently. "Mama, please. You don't have to do this. We have people who can cook. We can order anything you want." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the true extent of the damage Vanessa had done. My mother's eyes were cloudy with a permanent sort of caution, a fear that if she stopped working, the world would realize she was useless and throw her back into the gutter. "Emeka, let me work," she said, her voice trembling. "When I am cooking, I am not the cleaning lady. I am not the woman your wife made a fool of in front of all those big people. When I am in the kitchen, I am Abigail. I am your mother. Let me have this." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a mixture of love and a burning, righteous anger. This was the healing we needed, but it was going to be a long road. The fortune I had built meant nothing if I couldn't restore the dignity of the woman who had given me life. "You are Abigail Adeyemi," I said, kissing her forehead. "And before this week is over, every person who laughed at you will be kneeling at your feet asking for forgiveness." I walked back into the living room, my mind racing. "Papa, we need to talk about the empire. Tund is in custody, but the digital liquidation hasn't stopped. My accounts are bleeding. If I don't get to the central server at the bank's headquarters tonight, by tomorrow morning, I won't even be able to buy a sachet of water, let alone protect this family." Segun turned, his expression grim. "That is exactly what they want, Emeka. They want to draw you out. They know you'll try to save the money. It's a trap. Vanessa knows you're soft-hearted when it comes to the legacy of our name. She's waiting for you at the bank." "Then I won't go as myself," I said, a plan forming in the dark recesses of my mind. "She expects the billionaire. She expects the man in the limousine with a convoy of security. She doesn't expect the mysterious stranger she spent 10 years creating." "What are you saying?" "I'm going back to the beginning, Papa. I'm going to use the very disguise she forced Mama into." The plan was risky, bordering on insane. But in a city of 20 million people, the most invisible person is the one who is cleaning the floors. I spent the next hour transforming. I swapped my silk kaftan for a faded, grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit I found in the safe house garage. I rubbed a bit of engine oil on my forehead and wore a tattered baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. I looked in the mirror and didn't see the man who had graced the cover of Forbes Africa. I saw a struggling man, a laborer, a ghost in the machinery of Lagos. "Be careful, my son," my mother whispered as I prepared to leave. She handed me a small wooden cross she had kept hidden in her buba for years. "Destiny is a beautiful thing, but it is often forged in the fire. Don't let the fire consume you. I'll be back, Mama. With everything they took from us." I stepped out into the night. I didn't take the car. I hopped on the back of an Okada, a motorcycle taxi, feeling the hot, humid air of the Lagos night whip against my face. The city was alive, a cacophony of car horns, street vendors shouting, and the distant thumping of Afrobeat music from the clubs in Victoria Island. As we approached the towering headquarters of the United Bank of Africa, where my primary servers were housed, I saw the heavy security detail. Black SUVs were parked in a circle around the entrance. This wasn't the bank's normal security. These were mercenaries. I hopped off the bike a block away and began to walk, mimicking the tired, slumped gait of a man who had worked a 12-hour shift. I carried a battered toolbox I'd grabbed from the garage. I approached the service entrance, the same one the cleaning crews and maintenance workers used. A guard with a scowl and a submachine gun stepped into my path. "Where you to go?" he barked in pidgin. "Oga, I be the night AC technician," I said, pitching my voice lower, making it rougher. "The server room cooling system don't spoil. If I no fix the whole computer go burn-o. You want make your boss fire you?" The guard looked me up and down. He saw the oil on my face, the cheap jumpsuit, and the look of exhaustion. To him, I was invisible. I was just another nobody, trying to earn a meager living. "Enter," he muttered, waving me through with a flick of his barrel. "But make you sharp. No to wander about." I slipped inside. The back hallways were cool and sterile. I knew these halls. I had designed the layout of this building myself 5 years ago. I made my way to the freight elevator and pressed the button for the 22nd floor, the digital vault. When the doors opened, I expected to see tons men. Instead, the floor was eerily silent. The blue LED lights of the server racks flickered like the eyes of 1,000 mechanical beasts. I hurried to the master console, my heart hammering in my chest. I pulled out the physical key my father had given me. It was an old-school bypass, something that couldn't be hacked by any computer in the world. I inserted it into the manual override and began the process of freezing every account linked to Adeyemi Holdings. Processing, the screen blinked. 40%. 60%. You always were a bit too predictable, Emeka. The voice came from the shadows behind the main server rack. It was cold, melodic, and filled with a venom that made my skin crawl. I turned slowly. Vanessa stepped into the light. She wasn't wearing the designer gown from the gala. She was dressed in tactical black, her hair cropped short, and a smudge of dirt on her cheek that did nothing to hide her terrifying beauty. In her hand she held a compact, silver pistol. She wasn't alone. From the shadows, 3 men emerged, their faces masked. "The prison riot was a nice touch, wasn't it?" she said, circling me like a predator. "Cost me a fortune, but then again it's your fortune I'm spending. Or rather, it was." "Vanessa, give it up," I said, keeping my hands visible. "The police are looking for you. The EFCC has your offshore accounts. There is no new beginning for you. Only a cell." She laughed, a dry hacking sound. "The police? Emeka, you still believe in the system." "I am the system. I've been the one running your life for 5 years. I'm the one who made sure you never looked too closely at the charities I was funding. I'm the one who kept your pathetic mother in a cage and your father in a grave." She stepped closer, the barrel of the gun pointing directly at my heart. "And now you're going to do one last thing for me. You're going to authorize the final transfer to the Dubai account. All of it. The entire empire. And then you're going to have a tragic accident while trying to fix the AC." "I won't do it," I said, my voice steady. "You can kill me, but you'll never get the final authorization. It requires a biometric scan of a living person. If I'm dead, the money stays frozen forever." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. "Then I'll just have to make you wish you were dead first. I have your mother, Emeka." My blood turned to ice. "You're lying. She's at the safe house. It's guarded." "Was guarded," she corrected, checking her watch. "My men moved in 10 minutes after you left. They don't want the old woman. They want the leverage. If you don't press that button in the next 60 seconds, I'll give the order. And this time there won't be a cleaning lady to mock. There will only be a funeral." The screen behind me beeped. 90%. 95%. I looked at the console, then at the woman I had once loved. I was a billionaire, a man of immense power, but in this moment I felt like the most helpless man in Lagos. I had found my mother only to lose her again to the woman who had spent years destroying our lives. "Tick-tock, Emeka," Vanessa whispered, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Decide. The money or the mother? What is the king of industry really made of?" I reached for the keyboard, my fingers shaking. I could hear my mother's voice in my head. "Destiny is a beautiful thing, but it is often forged in the fire." I looked Vanessa dead in the eye. "You're right, Vanessa. I am soft-hearted. And that's why you've already lost." I slammed my hand down on the keyboard, but not on the authorize button. I hit the emergency ventilation override. A deafening roar filled the room as the massive industrial fans in the ceiling reversed direction, creating a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room and sent papers and debris flying everywhere. The sudden shift in pressure knocked the masked men off balance. Vanessa shrieked, her aim faltering. I lunged forward, not for her gun, but for the heavy metal toolbox I had brought. I swung it with all the strength of a man fighting for his soul. The toolbox connected with her wrist, and the silver pistol skittered across the floor, vanishing beneath a server rack. "Kill him," she screamed to her men. As the 3 mercenaries recovered and moved toward me, the elevator dings echoed through the floor. The doors slid open and a flashbang grenade rolled into the center of the room. Boom. White light and sound exploded, blinding everyone. I dropped to the floor, covering my ears. Through the ringing, I heard the rapid-fire succession of boots on marble and the shouts of men who sounded very much like professionals. When the smoke cleared, Vanessa's men were on the ground, zip-tied and silent. Standing over them was the mysterious stranger from earlier, the scarred man who had driven our limousine. He was holding a high-caliber rifle, and behind him stood my father, Segun. But it was the person behind my father who made my heart stop. My mother, Abigail, walked into the room. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't looking at the floor. She was wearing a clean white lace iro and buba, her head held high like the queen she was. "Mama?" I gasped, scrambling to my feet. How are you here?" "Your father is not the only one who has friends in high places, Emeka," she said, her voice filled with a new steel-like authority. The woman who used to bring me food in that room, she was a secret admirer of your father's. She's been working for him for years, waiting for the right moment to get me out. Vanessa was pinned against a server rack by one of the agents, her face a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated hatred. This is impossible. I had you. I had all of you. My father walked up to Vanessa. He didn't strike her. He didn't yell. He simply pulled a small recording device from his pocket and held it up. We've been broadcasting this entire confession to the EFCC and the police headquarters for the last 10 minutes, Vanessa, Segun said calmly. The riot, the escape, the kidnapping threats, it's all on the record. You didn't just walk into a trap, you built it for yourself. I walked over to my mother and took her hand. I looked at Vanessa, who was now being led away in real handcuffs, her screams of rage echoing down the hallway. It's over, Vanessa, I said. The cleaning lady just finished the job. As the police led her toward the elevator, I turned to my father. Is the money safe? The money is gone, Emeka, Segun said, looking at the computer screen. I froze. What? You hit the purge button, son. You didn't authorize the transfer, but you didn't freeze it either. You triggered the security burn protocol. The billion-dollar accounts, they've been wiped. Distributed to 500 different charities across West Africa in under 60 seconds. We are no longer billionaires. The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at the screen, then at my father, then at my mother. I had saved my family, but I had lost the empire I had spent my entire life building. I was, for all intents and purposes, a broke man. But then my mother did something I hadn't seen her do in 15 years. She laughed. A deep, soulful, beautiful laugh that filled the sterile server room with warmth. Good, she said, hugging us both. I never liked that big house anyway. It was too hard to clean. I smiled, a sense of incredible lightness washing over me. We were alive. We were together. We had unity and trust restored. But as we walked toward the elevator to leave the building for the last time, my father's scarred driver touched my shoulder. He leaned in and whispered something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Sir, the money didn't go to charities. The system was intercepted mid-purge. Someone else has the $1 billion. Someone who wasn't in this room. I looked at the driver, then back at the dark, silent servers. Who? I whispered. The driver handed me a small black card with a gold symbol, a symbol I recognized from my father's old business journals. A symbol of a secret society of Lagos power brokers who had been pulling the strings for decades. The game hasn't ended, Mr. Adeyemi, the driver said. It just moved to a bigger table. If you move one more inch, Emeka, I will make sure the last thing you see is the light fading from your father's eyes. The voice boomed through the damp, salt-crusted air of a derelict shipping warehouse at the Lagos port. I froze, my boots crunching on broken glass and rusted iron filings. The smell of the Atlantic Ocean was thick and suffocating, mixed with the stench of rotting timber and diesel. In the center of the warehouse, bathed in a single harsh spotlight, my father, Segun, was tied to a heavy industrial chair. His face was bruised, a thin trail of blood leaking from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes, those fierce, resilient eyes, were fixed on me, pleading for me to run. And standing behind him, holding a heavy-caliber pistol to his temple, was not Vanessa. It was the man I had trusted with my life for a decade. Chief Alyamide Tun's father. The man I had called Uncle since the day I made my first million. Uncle Alyamide? I whispered, the word feeling like ash in my mouth. You were the one? All this time? Don't call me that, he roared, his face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated greed. I am the architect of your life, Emeka. I am the one who orchestrated your father's death 15 years ago. I am the one who handpicked Vanessa to be your wife because I knew her heart was as hollow as a drum. I am the golden sun that has been shining on your success, and tonight the sun is going down. Why? I asked, stepping closer despite his warning. You had everything. You were already a billionaire. Why destroy my family? Why keep my mother in the dirt? Because your father was too soft. Alyamide spat, pressing the gun harder against Segun's head. He wanted to build schools. He wanted to give back to the villages. He wanted to use the empire for the people. I wanted power. I wanted to own the very ground the people walked on. And when he wouldn't step aside, I removed him. But the fool survived. He looked down at my father with disgust. I should have made sure you were in that car when it went over the bridge, Segun. But watching you rot in the shadows while I spent your money was almost as satisfying. You've already lost, Alyamide, Segun croaked, his voice raspy. The money is gone. Emeka purged the accounts. Alyamide let out a chilling laugh that echoed off the high corrugated metal ceiling. The purge? You think a simple digital override can stop me? I own the servers, Emeka. I own the men who built the firewalls. The money didn't go to charities. It's sitting in a transit account waiting for one thing. The Adeyemi blood authorization. He kicked a silver briefcase toward me. It slid across the floor, stopping at my feet. Inside was a portable biometric scanner, glowing with a soft, pulsing blue light. Your father's thumbprint isn't enough anymore, Alyamide hissed. The system evolved. It needs the air. It needs you. Give me your print and I let him live. We'll put you both on a private jet to Namibia, and you can live out your days as struggling farmers for all I care. But the fortune stays with me. I looked at the scanner, then at my father. My heart was pounding like a war drum. For 15 years, I had chased the ghost of this man, trying to honor a legacy that had been stolen. Now the thief was standing right in front of me, holding my father's life as ransom. Don't do it, Emeka, my father shouted. If you give him the money, he'll kill us anyway. He can't leave witnesses. Shut up. Alyamide screamed, striking my father across the face with the butt of the gun. I winced as if I had been struck myself. Stop. I'll do it. Just stop. I knelt down beside the briefcase, my hand trembling. I looked at the blue light. If I touched it, the billions of dollars that represented the labor of my father's life and my own would be gone forever, fueling the wickedness of a man who had no soul. But if I didn't, I would watch my father die for the second time in my life. That's it, boy, Alyamide cooed, his voice dropping to a seductive purr. Think of it as a second chance. Think of the healing you can have with your mother in some quiet corner of the world. What is money compared to family? You're a soft-hearted man, Emeka. Use that heart now. As my thumb hovered over the glass, a sudden, sharp sound cut through the warehouse. It wasn't a gunshot. It was the sound of a woman's heels, click, 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 on the concrete. From the darkness of the loading docks, a figure emerged. Vanessa. She looked like a ghost. Her clothes were torn, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were wide with a manic, flickering light. She was holding a small remote detonator in her hand. You forgot about me, Alyamide, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. You promised me the world. You said if I kept the mother hidden and the husband distracted, I would be the queen of Lagos. But then you sent your men to the prison to silence me. You didn't want me to escape, you wanted me dead. Alyamide shifted his aim toward her, but his face paled when he saw the detonator. Vanessa, be reasonable. The guards, the riot, it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. The only mistake was thinking I was as stupid as Tund. Vanessa screamed. I've wired this entire warehouse with C4, Alyamide. I found the stash your men left at the estate. If I press this button, we all go to hell together. The billionaire, the secret admirer, the mysterious stranger, and the betrayed wife. A big, happy family reunion in the fire. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like it would explode even without the C4. Alyamide was caught between me and the madwoman he had created. I saw his eyes darting toward the exit, calculating his chances. Vanessa, I said, my voice calm, trying to reach whatever sliver of humanity was left in her. Put it down. If you do this, there is no new beginning. There is only an end. There was never a beginning for me, Emeka, she sobbed, tears finally breaking through her mask of cruelty. I was a girl from the slums of Bariga. Alyamide found me. He dressed me up, he taught me how to speak, he turned me into a weapon to destroy you. I never loved you, but I never hated you either, until I saw your mother. Until I saw that even after everything I did to her, she still had more dignity than I will ever have. I hated her because she was real and I am just a puppet. She looked at the detonator, her thumb white against the red button. Vanessa, look at me, a new voice entered the fray. My mother, Abigail, walked out from behind a stack of shipping containers. She must have followed us from the safe house. She looked small against the backdrop of the industrial warehouse, but her presence was like a pillar of granite. You, Vanessa hissed. Why won't you just disappear? Because God is not finished with me yet, my mother said, her voice steady and filled with a strange, haunting compassion. Vanessa, my daughter, I know the pain of being used. I know the pain of being discarded like yesterday's trash. But you don't have to carry this fire into the grave. Forgive yourself. Let go of the hate before it burns you to ash. Forgive. Vanessa laughed, a broken, jagged sound. After what I did to you, I made you scrub floors. I mocked you in front of the world. And yet here I am, my mother said, taking a step toward her. still standing. Still a mother. My son is alive. My husband is back. The miracle has already happened, Vanessa. You can't destroy what God has built. But you can save yourself. For a moment the world seemed to stand still. Vanessa looked at my mother, her hand shaking so hard the detonator almost slipped. The unity of my parents standing together despite 15 years of torture was a power that Alyamid's money couldn't buy and Vanessa's rage couldn't break. But Alyamid saw his opening. He didn't care about the bomb. He didn't care about Vanessa. He only cared about the money. He lunged for me, trying to force my thumb onto the scanner. "Give it to me," he roared. I fought him off, the two of us tumbling across the floor in a desperate, ugly struggle. The briefcase was kicked aside, the blue light spinning across the concrete. "No!" Vanessa screamed. She didn't press the button. She threw the detonator at Alyamid's head. It struck him square in the temple, dazing him just long enough for me to scramble away. But as Alyamid fell, his gun discharged. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. I felt a searing heat graze my shoulder, but I didn't stop. I tackled Alyamid, pinning him to the ground, my hands around his throat. All the years of pain, all the years of my mother's suffering, poured into my arms. I wanted to end him. I wanted to squeeze the life out of the man who had stolen my childhood. "Emeka." No. It was my mother's voice. She was standing over us, her hand on my shoulder. "Don't become him, my son," she whispered. "Vengeance is the Lord's. If you kill him, he wins. He takes your soul, and that is the only thing he hasn't been able to buy." I looked down at Alyamid. He was gasping for air, his face turning purple, his eyes filled with a pathetic, whimpering terror. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a son. He was just a small, greedy man who was afraid to die. I let go. I stood up, my chest heaving, and backed away. "The police are outside, Alyamid," I said, my voice cold and hard. "They followed the tracker in my father's watch. You're not going to Namibia. You're going to the same cell you tried to put Vanessa in." Just then the warehouse doors were kicked open. Blue and red lights flooded the space. Dozens of officers from the Special Fraud Unit and the police command swarmed the building. They tackled Alyamid. They secured Vanessa, who didn't fight back. She simply sat on the floor, weeping into her hands. I rushed to my father and began untying the ropes. His hands were raw, but as soon as he was free, he stood up and pulled me into a crushing embrace. "You did well, Emeka," he whispered into my ear. "You did so well." We walked over to my mother. The three of us stood in the center of that dark, dirty warehouse, surrounded by the wreckage of our past. The billionaire empire was in ruins, the money was in limbo, and our names were in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. But as I looked at my parents, the man who had returned from the dead and the woman who had survived the shadows, I felt a sense of unity and love winds that I had never known in my mansion. "Is it over?" my mother asked, looking at the police leading Alyamid away. "It's over, Mama," I said. But as the lead investigator approached us, his face wasn't one of celebration. He was holding the silver briefcase with the biometric scanner. "Mr. Adeyemi," the investigator said, looking at me, "we've secured the site. But there's a problem. The scanner, it's been activated. Not by you and not by Alyamid." I looked at the briefcase. The blue light had turned a steady, pulsing green. "The transfer has been completed," the investigator continued. "The entire Adeyemi fortune has been moved to a single, encrypted destination. And according to the logs, it was authorized by a third family member." I looked at my father. He shook his head. I looked at my mother. She looked just as confused. "Who?" I asked. The investigator looked at his tablet. "The name on the authorization is Tund Alyamid." My heart stopped. Tund. My brother. He was supposed to be in a cell. "He escaped during the transfer to the courthouse," the investigator said. "And he didn't just take the money, Emeka. He took something else. Something he found in your private safe at the mansion." I felt a cold dread wash over me. I knew what was in that safe. It wasn't money. It wasn't gold. It was the original land deeds to our family's ancestral village. The land where my mother was born, the land that held the secret to a massive newly discovered oil reserve. Tund wasn't just taking the past. He was stealing the future. "Where is he?" I roared. "He's at the village, Emeka," my father said, his voice dropping to a graveyard whisper. "He's going to the sacred grove. He's going to burn the deeds in front of the elders to prove we have no claim. If he does that, the land becomes state property, and he's already signed a deal with a foreign conglomerate to manage it." I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes, not for the money, but for the home she had dreamed of returning to for 15 years. "We have to go," I said, my voice like iron. "We have to go to the village. The road is blocked by the storm," the investigator warned. "And Tund has his own militia." "I don't care if I have to walk through the fire," I said, taking my mother's hand. "He's taken our pride. He's taken our peace. He's not taking our home." The red dust of my ancestral village, Umudike, rose in thick plumes behind our vehicle, coating the windows in a layer of earth that felt like a burial. But this wasn't a funeral, it was a resurrection. Beside me, my mother, Abigail, sat with a quiet, regal stillness I hadn't seen since I was a small boy. She wasn't the cleaning lady anymore. She was a daughter of the soil returning to her roots. "We are almost there, Emeka," my father, Segun, said from the driver's seat. His hands, though aged, gripped the steering wheel with the same precision he used to command a boardroom. "Tund thinks he can buy the spirits of this land with the fortune he stole. He forgets that the earth remembers who tended it when it was dry." The road to the sacred grove was narrow, flanked by ancient Irako trees that seemed to lean in, whispering secrets of the past. As we pulled into the clearing, the sight made my blood boil. 3 black SUVs were parked haphazardly across the hallowed ground. Tund stood in the center of the grove, flanked by 4 armed men in tactical gear. In front of him, the council of elders sat on carved wooden stools, their faces etched with deep concern and confusion. Tund was holding a stack of yellowed parchments, the ancestral deeds to the Adeyemi land, and a gold-plated lighter. "Sign the papers, elders." Tund's voice was high-pitched, laced with a desperate madness. "I have the money. I have the power. This land is wasted on farming and tradition. There is oil beneath our feet, and I am the only one who can bring progress to this backwater. Progress is not built on the graves of our ancestors, Tund," I shouted, stepping out of the car before it had even fully stopped. Tund spun around, his eyes wild. "Emeka, you're supposed to be in Lagos, mourning your empty bank accounts. How did you get here?" "I walked through the fire you started, Tund," I said, walking toward him, my heart steady. "And I didn't come alone." My father stepped out, followed by my mother. When the elders saw Segun, a collective gasp went up. One of them, the oldest man in the village, stood up with a trembling hand pointed at my father. "Segun? Is it the ghost of the son we lost?" "It is no ghost, Papa Ikem," Segun said, his voice echoing with authority. "It is the man who was betrayed, returning to claim what belongs to his blood." Tund laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. "It doesn't matter. I have the deeds. I authorized the final transfer of the empire to my accounts. I own the Adeyemi name now. By the time the sun sets, this grove will be a drilling site, and you will be nothing but trespassing beggars." He flicked the lighter. The flame danced, inches away from the fragile paper that represented our history, our destiny, and our future. "Wait." My mother's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made even the armed guards hesitate. She stepped forward, her white lace attire glowing against the deep green of the forest. "You want this land, Tund?" she asked, her eyes fixed on him. "You want the fortune that comes from the ground?" "I want what I've earned," Tund hissed. "I spent years in Emeka's shadow. I did the work while he played the billionaire. I deserve this." "You have earned nothing but shame," Abigail said, her voice filled with a profound sadness. "You look at me and see a woman who scrubbed floors. You look at me and see a joke your wife played at a party. But you forgot one thing, Tund. I am the daughter of the priestess of this grove. My blood is the only deed this land recognizes." She reached into the small woven bag she carried and pulled out a handful of dried kola nuts and a small, smooth stone from the village stream. She didn't scream, she didn't fight. She began to speak in a low, rhythmic chant in our native tongue, a prayer for justice, for healing, and for the restoration of the broken. The wind began to pick up, whistling through the Irako trees. The armed guards looked around nervously, their hands shifting on their weapons. They were city men. They didn't understand the spiritual weight of the Nigerian interior. "Stop her," Tund yelled to his men. "It's just an old woman's superstition. Grab her." But the guards didn't move. They were staring at the entrance of the grove. Out of the shadows of the trees, dozens of village men and women emerged. They didn't have guns. They had machetes for clearing brush, heavy wooden staffs, and the silent, immovable power of a community that had been pushed too far. They formed a circle around Tund and his mercenaries, a wall of human resilience. "The police are at the village entrance, Tund," I said, stepping beside my mother. "They aren't the ones you've paid off. These are federal agents from the capital. Your brotherhood of power brokers has already turned on you. They don't like losers, and tonight, you are the biggest loser in West Africa. Tund looked at the lighter, then at the deeds, then at the circle of villagers closing in. His arrogance crumbled, replaced by a pathetic, shivering fear. He realized that no amount of money could buy him a way out of a forest that knew his sins. I can give you half, Emeka, he stammered. We can be partners again. Think of the empire. The empire is being rebuilt, Tund, I said, my voice cold. But not with oil and greed. It's being built with the unity you tried to destroy. One of the village youths stepped forward and snatched the deeds from Tund's shaking hand. He handed them to the elder, who looked at them and then at my mother. Abigail, the elder said. Welcome home. The sirens finally reached the grove, the blue and red lights flashing against the ancient trees. Tund was led away in silence, his head bowed, the weight of his betrayal finally dragging him down. He wouldn't find a way out of this, not this time. The legal fallout would be total. His father's crimes and his own were now a matter of public record. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Umudike, the silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. The tension building for 15 years had finally snapped, leaving behind a profound peace. What now, Emeka? My father asked, putting his arm around my mother. I looked at the grove, then at the villagers who were already beginning to sing a song of thanksgiving. I thought about the mansion in Lagos, the limousine and the private jet. They were gone, and strangely I didn't miss them. We fulfill the miracle, Papa, I said. We use what's left of the funds we recovered to build that school Mama always wanted. We turn this land into a sanctuary, not an oil field. We show the world that the Adeyemi family doesn't need a billionaire title to be rich. A few months later, the headlines in Lagos had changed. They no longer spoke of my downfall. Instead, they spoke of a new beginning. I stood on the porch of our new home in the village, a beautiful, modern house that respected the local architecture. My mother was in the garden, teaching the village children how to read. She wasn't a servant, she was a teacher, a mentor, a queen. Vanessa was serving a long sentence, her greed finally finding its cage. Tund and his father were behind bars, their empire dismantled and its assets distributed to the victims of their many frauds. It was a happy ending that didn't involve a boardroom but a backyard. I walked over to my mother and handed her a glass of cold water. She looked up at me, her face smooth, the lines of worry replaced by a soft, glowing healing. You look happy, Mama, I said. I am, Emeka, she said, taking my hand. Because for the first time in my life, nobody is looking at me and seeing a cleaning lady. They see me, and they see you. Love wins, my son. It always wins. I looked out over the green hills of our home. I was no longer a billionaire in currency, but I was the richest man in the world. I had my father's wisdom, my mother's resilience, and a trust restored that would last for generations. Our destiny was never in the money. It was in the return. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think of Emeka's journey? Was the justice for Tund and Vanessa satisfying? We want to hear your thoughts. Comment below. Thank you for watching the Royal Griot, where every story is a lesson and every ending is a new beginning. We'll see you in the next one.